Okay. Shall we? Okay, welcome to you all to our Monday, March 12th, 2018 City Council meeting. Please join me in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councilmember Stearns? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Wagner? Here. Councilmember Sacklet? Here. Councilmember Engstrom? Here. Mayor Mortar?
Here. Okay, let us get underway, and I'd like to remind everyone to, 3 finger widths away from your microphone if possible, so that we can be heard. That's right, every time. Some of you have fatter fingers than others of us. Make it do. Okay, first thing on the agenda is public comment. Those of you who would like to make a comment about something that's either on the consent agenda or something that you'd like to share that isn't a regular agendized item, you're welcome to come up and share your comments in a 3-minute time frame. And start with your name, please. Seeing none, we'll move on. Okay, we'll begin with staff comments.
Yes, I suppose first and foremost we should announce that the fire department will not be present this evening to give their report on the staffing. They are presently engaged in a fire in the Shasta area in which emergency evacuations are under order. So we will be asking that the council receive the report, and if you concur with the recommendation for an ad hoc committee, that you appoint that ad hoc committee, and we just continue the item without discussion. In addition to that, as I've told this council previously, we've had interest expressed in the landing project from another development company. We spent part of last week with the development company, with representatives, and touring the property, looking at other properties throughout the city with potential development. Basic response is pretty definitive. The landing does not have the type of high I-5 access they find necessary. It does not have the I-5 visibility that they would want. Therefore, they have basically no interest in the landing. They did express some interest in the property at West Lake Street interchange in I-5, so we're forwarding information on that. But we still have the 2 outstanding applications we're hoping to come in on the landing.
I'm sorry, Bruce, which was the development company you just named, the name of it? What did you name it?
They're a Sacramento-based company.
Sacramento-based.
Yeah.
Do they have a name?
Not to the best of my knowledge. I mean, I didn't get his corporate name. He just simply had no interest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and you say that there are 2 other companies. Are those the other 2 companies that you contacted? Or,
Yes.
Or was this one of the 2? Was this one of the 2, or there?
No, this is the third. So there's still 2 that are coming in. The one is doing the marketing study with Marriott. That's what they're waiting for.
And you're saying the property they were interested in is at Lake and where?
I-5,
Would that be the CDMS?
down by this, where the CHP building is?
Oh, over there.
The CDMS property?
Yes.
That's the owner of the property is CDMS.
Any other staff report?
4 individuals, last name, last initials.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Council reports. Council members, any comments?
Yeah, last city council meeting, we had a citizen get up and talk about why the council members weren't taking more a leadership role in, for example, the protests that are happening on March 26th as a result of the Florida shooting. And I just wanted to remind the public that the council members represent all the citizens and really can't be a leader in a specific political movement, because that would show a bias. We're trying to represent all the public, so we try to not present ourselves that way. Also, the Lions Luncheon, since Lucille's closed, has been moved to Casa Ramos. That'll be Sunday at 1 o'clock, March 18th.
Sunday?
Yeah, there's a tradition with Lions, when you become a manifested group, that they celebrate with a luncheon and invite other Lions members from other regions to come and celebrate with us. And so it will be happening this Sunday, the 18th at 1 at the Casa Ramos.
Okay, thank you. Other council members? Reports? Comments? We're on council and staff comments. The very beginning of the agenda before
Wait, number
consent.
5. We skipped over number 4.
What did we skip?
There was no public comment?
Correct.
Okay. Actually, I've got some questions I'd like to find out status
You're
of.
going to need to speak into your mic. Thank you.
I'd like to find out status of internship efforts, number 1. Number 2, if there was any final resolution for a possible future second exit for the senior housing or affordable care facility that had been destined next to the hospital. And number 3, has staff heard anything more in terms of from its solar contact regarding possible solar farm at wastewater treatment plant?
Solar, did you say? How would you feel, Tim, if what we did was give staff an opportunity to respond to these things with a memo to staff?
That's fine, sure.
So what I understood is what's the status of internships? What's the situation with the second exit needed for Kingston Road? And where are we at with solar feasibility for wastewater treatment plant and other city facilities, or not? Or at least the wastewater treatment plant?
Wastewater treatment plant specifically, although any other facilities, city hall or fire station, wherever,
Okay.
police station.
Is that acceptable, Mr. Manager? Okay. Okay, thank you. John, do you have anything? No comment. Okay, I don't either tonight. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to move then to the consent agenda. This is the opportunity I get to practice my reading. Are there any of you who walked in a little bit late who'd like to comment on the consent agenda before we go into it? Okay. The city manager recommends approval of the following consent agenda items. All resolutions and ordinances on this agenda or added hereto shall be introduced or adopted as applicable by title only, and the full reading thereof is hereby waived. A, approval of minutes, February 26th, 2018, special city council meeting, February 26th, 2018, regular city council meeting. B, acceptance of Brown Act committee minutes for the Downtown Enhancement Advisory Committee meeting of January 24th, 2018. C, approval of disbursements, accounts payable to 2818, total gross payroll and taxes for the period ending 2/25/18. D, resolution of support for Proposition 68, Water and Parks Bond. E, approval of surplus, and that would be Resolution CCR 18-12. F, General Plan 2017 Annual Report, CCR 18-13. And finally, resolution number CCR 18-14, setting the date and time of the Downtown Enhancement Advisory Committee meetings. Is there a motion for approval?
A request that item F be pulled from the consent agenda for purpose of discussion.
Okay. What's the timeliness constraint on this one, Juliana?
I need it before April 1st.
Before April 1st. Okay, so we're talking about it tonight. Okay.
There hasn't been a second on that motion yet. Is there an opportunity to discuss it while we're still on the consent agenda item, or you really need it removed and have discussed separately?
I just am requesting that it be treated separately. We can move ahead with a motion to approve other items and then take up F afterwards, or in any order that the mayor deems appropriate.
Okay, so
And-
we've pulled, I'll pull item number F, and we'll include it in tonight's agenda. Is there a second on the motion?
There's never been a requirement to have a second to pull something off the consent
No.
agenda.
Is there a second on the motion to approve the consent agenda?
I don't know that there's been there's been a motion yet.
Okay, I will move to approve the consent
Oh.
agenda, numbers A through E and G, with F removed.
I'll second
Thank you.
that.
Okay, all in,
I would like some comment period, if you don't
okay,
mind.
discussion
Discussion.
first.
Just a couple minor corrections on the minutes. The special meeting started at 4:30, not 5. We would mind correcting that. And what was the other thing? On the regular meeting, I did attend the 226 Regional Water Action Group meeting, the quarterly meeting, and that wasn't mentioned in the minutes as far as my outside attendance. And lastly, I followed up with Steve Gerace on the article on short-term rentals, only because the motion that was stated verbally at the meeting wasn't quite correct, and none of the other council members actually corrected it, so I just wanted to bring awareness around the proper statement of motions. When we looked into it further, the staff indicated, their write-up said, city staff to indicate to the county the city council's preference for short-term rentals in the city sphere of influence where there is an owner or long-term renter on site rather than short-term rental without. Again, I think it's still not exactly clear, because I think what we're asking for is to maintain housing stock and preferably have someone who resides there, but doesn't mean they're actually present on site when the place is getting rented. So, right, because residency is you have to live there at least 6 months out of the year. You can, do you understand the subtlety
The
here?
purpose of the minutes is to record and reflect exactly what was spoken, not what you meant.
Okay, so I understand the minutes are correct because what was actually spoken wasn't really the intent. Okay, so how do we clarify at this point if what was spoken, well, the motion was said more or less incorrectly, how do we correct that for the public?
I think what would be important to know is whether the letter has been sent to the county already.
No, they pushed back the meeting. So
Okay.
if you want, I can just clarify that in my letter to them, because it wasn't a formal recommendation, it was a concern.
Then how do we let the public know? I guess is what I'm trying to guess. I'm trying to understand at this point. No?
Make a statement that you want to clarify?
Yeah, I don't know. Just say
Okay.
it, just say
I'm
it.
just, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Unanimously carried. In order to schedule item number F tonight, I'd like to find out, Muriel, will you be needing to stay after your audit report? Will you be planning to stay? No? Okay, then I would like to schedule the discussion, which I hope is brief, on the general plan shortly after the final audit report item. Okay. So I think we're ready for Muriel's staff report on final audit report, item number 8 on your agenda.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2017 financial statements were issued last week. I believe you received copies of that in your packet, along with a staff report that discussed in detail many of the things included in the audit. At this point, what I would like to do now is open it up for any questions council or the public may have concerning these financial statements.
Yes, many, many pages of staff report. Thank you. Questions from council for Muriel regarding the final audit?
Just for everyone's benefit, it was a clean audit.
I'm sorry?
It was a clean audit.
Yes, it would be helpful if you would just summarize.
There were no qualifications to the audit. And this year it was a single audit because we did have more than $750,000 worth of federal expenditures, which means that the auditor had to do additional testing in those particular areas to determine that our financial statements were correct for the things that they had tested. That's the only difference. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Muriel? So I see, I note that there were no deficiencies.
Correct.
No surprises,
No findings or question costs.
no findings. So this means you should get a raise, right?
If it were only that easy.
Okay, is there any public comment regarding the final audit report? Okay, seeing none then, I'll ask for a motion for approval of resolution CCR 18-15.
Move to approve CCR 18-15, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta accepting the independent audit report for fiscal year 2016-17.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed. Congratulations, Muriel. Okay, then, let's take up the general plan item, annual report. You want to express your concern, Tim?
Well, I had a number of questions and some comments that I sent to Juliana earlier today, and she responded as to them, or a number of them. One of the comments I have, and this would not be taking it in page order as I did with my questions to Juliana and as she did previously, but I am concerned about a statement that appears on page 10 of the report at OC 14.
What page of this, of the packet?
That's a good question.
The TAP packet pages are numbered both ways.
Well, can you tell me which page you're on then?
34.
Okay.
Yeah, correct, it's 34. Thank you.
OC-14. I'm sorry, that's not the one I want to start with. I want to start with page 16, General Plan 45 revision, which I guess would be a couple pages later. And there is a statement in there that I don't know that it accurately reflects the city's position. And I recommend that sentence be rephrased or deleted. It says, "The goals, policies, and implementation measures of the 2007 general plan no longer match the vision and dreams of the community." I think that is a overstatement. I don't think that there would be any harm done to the discussion about the 2045 revision if that sentence were removed. I think much of the 2007 general plan very much reflects the goals, policies, and desired measures of the city and the dreams and visions of this community. So that's one item.
So Juliana, could you summarize what the intent of this is, this overall general plan report that we have to do to the state, number one?
Sure.
And then, I guess, just respond point by point. This should reflect what we agree is true, definitely. So I guess we'll need to go through them one by one and get a response. So go ahead, yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
if you
Thank
talk
you,
next
John.
to it, you can't hear.
So
Sure.
just review what the intent of this report is first.
Sure. It's just a narrative about what the city's accomplished this year. So I also have to do a survey for the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and for the California Housing and Community Development Office. It's just a narrative and overview of what we've accomplished this year for ordinances and general plan goals and measures. And because we're doing a general plan revision, they just needed a short narrative on that. So it's just a narrative.
Okay, so what Tim is suggesting is that we remove the sentence that said it no longer reflects the current vision and dreams.
It doesn't change the intent
It
of the
doesn't change
report.
anything else.
Nope.
We don't need it to justify our decision to do another general plan revision, so.
It helps having a justification, but I can make something else up to put in its
Yeah.
place if
Well,
that makes you happy.
I'm okay with the sentence being in, so I don't know at this point. You know, if you want to give broadband initiative as an example, there's nothing in the general plan about broadband. So that in itself is a huge difference between our vision and dreams from 2007. That's 11 years ago.
There are things that are to be added to the general plan, and there are some parts of the general plan that will change. But I don't think that we are disavowing our general plan. We're going to be living under the 2007 general plan for the next 3 or 4 years. So I think it would
Okay.
be better to,
So in order to tidy this up, can we just say there are some additions that need to be made to better reflect the
Yeah,
current discussions around our vision, blah, blah, blah?
yeah, it doesn't, nobody actually reads this, so
Yeah,
it's okay.
yeah, okay.
That's
Thank you.
genuine.
Tim?
So,
going
going.
back to the report itself, page 5 of the report, and again, I don't have the agenda packet page, but they're double numbered.
It's going to be page 29.
It says implementation measures have been completed since 2007 pertaining to mixed-use development, city water master plan, and city storm drainage master plan. I think the better terminology would be implementation measures have been taken, not completed, because we don't have, at this point, mixed-use development in place.
we do.
City water master plan, we have a new city water master plan,
We have a master water plan and drainage plan.
and we have a new storm drainage master plan.
So the goals, so I answered that question for you because we did a full recap of all the implementation measures last year.
Right, I
And
looked
it's
at
not
those.
about having necessarily new plans, but implementing steps within those plans, which we have achieved since 2007.
That's why I suggest, it talks, the wording in the report says implementation measures have been completed, and I think maybe using the word taken would be better, because I think we're still operating under,
Okay, it doesn't matter, but okay.
okay.
I'm okay with the word complete because she's just saying some implementation measures have been completed.
But this is a document that the city will be referring back to in future years. There may be future council members who are referring back to this.
This is
So I just-
basically just copy and pasted from last year's report.
I thought it'd be better to be more precise.
How many more things do you have, Tim? Is this something that can be handled outside a city council meeting? Is this something that can be handled between you and Juliana, or is this something that needs to be a consensus of the council? I
did answer most of the questions, and anything as far as semantics, I can easily just change that. It's really, frankly, they don't really look at the narratives for these. All they're really concerned about is how many housing permits we did per year and which goals that we achieved, and that we're doing and the ordinances.
Would you be agreeable to our just meeting and discussing this, and then
I can just make the changes and send it. That's fine.
have it come back on the 26th for approval, or
I would rather
you wanna
have
go
it-
through it right now?
I would rather have it confirmed tonight so that I can send it to the state.
Okay. So perhaps planner can make
Were there other?
that semantic change on page 12 of the report, HO1.
In the future, it would be really helpful if you could quote because we're lost. Page 36.
Page 36 of the packet, HO1. Under status, it indicates complete. And this is provide an adequate supply of sound, affordable housing for existing and future residents of Mount Shasta. Well, obviously, we haven't completed that process, and we don't currently have adequate supply of sound, affordable housing. So is there a way that we can change complete to making progress?
So you're referencing OC-1? I'm sorry, which one?
HO1.
Page 11?
Housing, HO1.
HO1 on page 12.
Okay. Yeah, so most of these, when it says complete, it's usually ongoing, but in reference, so as per my response to you via email, it's not in reference to affordable houses built. It's about having adequate zoning for the opportunity to have that, and we are in compliance with that goal measure. So it's just worded differently. So we don't actually have to build any affordable housing each year. We just have to have an adequate amount of zoning, which we haven't done any rezoning this year from residential to commercial. So we still have an adequate amount of residential zoned parcels.
Well, we do have an adequate amount of zoned parcels. The problem is that those zoned parcels cost more than, cost so much that it's not really possible to put affordable housing on those parcels.
Yep, that's not what this implementation measure is asking though.
So,
And so that's something we would consider for the future general plan, is looking at building cost and affordability from that lens.
one of the things that we had communication about earlier today, was that the Orchard property is city-owned and a potential site for affordable housing. I understand it's not listed in the inventory because it's not inside city limits at this point. And the landing is another possible location. The east side of the landing is another possible location for affordable housing. But currently it's not listed in the inventory because we don't have the landing, any part of the landing designated for residential. So I was trying to suggest that perhaps we ought to be taking some action on that to indicate that a portion of the landing might be used for residential.
That's a different goal than what's stated as being complete though. I think the point of it is these are fine ideas to have as short-term projects, but as far as the general plan goes, it doesn't have a goal or implementation talking about that. So when I do the annual report, I wouldn't put that in there because that's not a goal that I can meet,
So, all right.
if that makes sense.
And that's fine. How do we, from a planning perspective then, how do we take action in the next couple of years to perhaps create the possibility for this city to have some affordable housing on the city-owned landing property? Because what I understand from past discussion is there's no intent to make any interim changes until the general plan is done, and then only after that to actually make the changes, which puts us about 4 years down the road without that housing that we need.
So that has nothing to do with the annual progress report. It can be a future agenda item like Councilmember Wagner suggested, but as far as the annual progress report, I take what's in the general plan now and I say if we've completed it or if we're making action on it, and then it goes into this report. So that's a separate topic from this.
Which is why when we reviewed this in the pre-agenda meeting, we agreed that this was basically a stamp
rubber
thing with
stamp.
no, rubber stamp, thank you, a rubber stamp thing that we did every year.
Yeah,
It was just a review of what we had done, the planning commission saw it, saw no changes.
and I can make the adjusted amendments that Councilmember Stern requested for the language in the general plan revision. That's not an issue, but as far as these go, the way they're put down is how I measure if they're done or not. I mean, I don't necessarily, you can argue that it's not a great way of measuring whether we're meeting affordable housing or a great way of doing these things, but that's something we include in the general plan revision. That's not something we fix in the annual progress report.
And is there a choice in between the annual progress report? I understand it's not something that we fix in the annual progress report, but showing it as complete in terms of we have adequate vacant land inventory for affordable housing. In terms of acreage and zoning, the answer is, well, yes, we do, but realistically, in real life, we don't. So I was thinking
I would
perhaps,
recommend that for a future agenda item.
I
So-
was thinking that perhaps the complete could be changed to in progress.
So I see another response to this, Tim, in that I see that what you're trying to do is use this general plan report process to acquaint us with things that we could be doing between now and when the general plan revision will have been completed, that you want to use it as an opportunity to assess, no, we really haven't done what we hope to do under this item. This particular one, we've given the city manager a goal, was pretty well laid out of everything we wanted him to do, including the affordable aspect of housing. And I suggest that we leave it up to him to make progress during the year on that goal we gave him, rather than use this as the thing to talk about here and to gauge progress toward having accomplished the goal.
I'm trying to make this, at least from my perspective, somewhat more accurate, because complete seems to say we've got it taken care of, whereas in progress means something which I think is a little more realistic.
Any other comments from council?
Yeah, I understand the status is complete because the way the annual progress report is written and the way your implementation measures are written, yes, those are complete. And that's what you want to communicate to the state, that we meet our obligation for having enough land for affordable housing. That's what she's saying. So I don't see any need to change the word complete.
So, Tim, I don't know what the process should look like here. Do you have any intervention, Bruce? I'm ready to move on and just agree that this particular one is complete and that you have an ongoing goal that says we'll continue to evaluate, including inventory of city-owned land, the opportunities for housing.
Well, you've assigned to the manager certain goals. You've done that in writing, that's rather clear. What we're talking about here is a reporting requirement to State Office of Planning and Research. The state is required to file annually. And Ms. Lucchese has gone through it, and I think she has answered the questions as asked by the state. The questions that Councilmember Stearns is bringing up are important questions, but I think they're outside the context of this report to the state. And if you want to reopen the discussion of goals, you are free to do so. I would suggest you do the workshop. So I think whether we have a program in place right now to build affordable housing is a different question.
Well, let's take a look at HO1, the second section down. The city shall provide adequate opportunities for persons from all economic segments of the community to participate in the development of the housing element. That's fine. Next, implementation measure. In order to increase public input and support of the city's housing programs, city shall encourage the participation of groups interested in housing in the annual Planning Commission review of the housing element. That's fine. This will occur through public notice and normal contact and solicitation of participation with local agencies and interest. We got a couple extra words in there. Agencies and interest groups. Again, I would think rather than saying it's complete, it's done, it's passed, putting it down as in progress would be more accurate because it is something that is going on all the time. So I leave it, those are my comments.
Okay. Unless there's any objection, I'd like to move on. And we've heard Tim's concerns, and I think we've heard a response from staff.
So for just a question, Ms. Lucchese, do you need formal council action to file this with the state?
I do.
So we need to address the issue.
Okay, so
So is there a motion for
yeah,
approval
I'll
of the
move that
resolution?
the city council accept the general plan 2017 annual report as a resolution of the city council of the city of Mount Shasta, CCR 18-13, accepting the 2017 general plan annual progress report.
I'll second that as provided that planner makes the semantic changes that she already agreed to make.
Does the planner accept the minor changes? She
Yeah.
does.
Okay, so there's a motion as amended. Is there a second?
He just seconded it.
Oh, you seconded it, I'm sorry.
It's a conditional second.
The conditional second, I'm sorry, Tim, my apologies. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Resolution is passed then. Okay, then we go on to what is labeled item number 9 on your agenda, discussion and possible action of fire department staffing and salary.
So as we announced at the beginning of the meeting, the fire department is not present tonight. They are in Shastina on a brush fire that has necessitated evacuation of major portions of that subdivision, it's my understanding. This report can be received for information items, and we would request that you look at the recommendation of the fire department and their request that an ad hoc committee be established to work with the fire department. Given that, I would recommend you appoint an ad hoc committee and forego any further discussion except through the ad hoc.
Okay.
Question for city manager. How would the ad hoc committee, without our having discussion amongst council members and hearing from any public comment that might be on this item, how would the ad hoc committee know how to discuss and negotiate with the fire department for a memorandum of understanding? I think it would be appropriate to have the discussion before the appointment of an ad hoc committee. And therefore, I suggest that the matter simply be
That's clearly within the council purview.
continued to the next meeting.
Well, similar to the rate study, you assign 2 council members to meet with your staff to work it out, and then they come back to council with their recommendations. Isn't that how it works?
In this case, I think it's a good point you raised, Tim. What I had looked forward to was a review of the main aspects that they provide alternatives for, and then perhaps at least a discussion by us to narrow down the the alternatives we focus on. Let me say, just for instance, then they recommend that under volunteer pay, it's possible, though not probable, that increasing the per-call pay would entice more volunteers. It might be more reasonable to consider the stipend instead. Just as an example, we might want to narrow down the focus of the ad hoc. So I think unless there's, and at which point we really need to have some feedback from the staff, the staff present. So unless there's objection to it, and realizing that the next agenda we have is very full, we won't be able, more than likely, to entertain that discussion at the next agenda. So there's that. Then there's another consideration that I had, which I intended to ask Muriel tonight, regarding the pay equality and the fire chief's salary. We had talked earlier during our conversations about staffing pay that we might want to pay for a salary study for fire, police, and public works, to hire a consultant to do that, to compare across communities and that sort of thing. And I wondered how the timing of that dovetails, assuming we did. I don't know that we made a formal decision. We certainly indicated an inclination to do that, not out of this budget year, but how would that dovetail with what we come up with here? I don't.
Okay, well, that's, when you get into staffing salaries, having a salary survey would be quite helpful, but you have not addressed that, so we can bring that back to you and bring it back together with the fire issue as a part of the report that Muriel and I could put together, and what it would take to do a salary survey for the city. Bring that back, and you have that information all at the same time.
What do the rest of you think? I too am wondering how the ad hoc is going to even make recommendations here based on what really isn't a full package of information. Yeah, it's an excellent job. We are getting there. This is a much better product than what we first saw. But these kinds of considerations are long overdue, and I'm hoping that another, I don't know, month or so won't hurt too badly our discussion. So,
On the other
comments?
hand, if we can start discussion with the fire department directly and go ahead and let a couple council members dive into the details and explore the specifics, we could get going with that. So I'm okay with assigning the ad hoc committee tonight.
if we did that, what would we consider their finish, their deadline? I mean, what are we assigning them specifically, and when will they know they're done? When we don't even know if we're going to try and dovetail in the salary survey. See? So there's no benefit to it.
We could start the conversation.
Well, let me just ask, are there those of you who know now that you're interested in serving on this ad hoc? Paul? You pass, yeah. You're a good numbers guy. Yeah, I understand. Okay.
We could encourage Paul to go ahead and start understanding more in depth and
Well,
having.
he's certainly welcome to do that. And the rest of you, as you're contemplating, because we'll need a second person, as we're contemplating signing up for this duty, we could certainly go into more detail.
I'm willing to serve on the ad hoc committee, but I think I agree with the mayor that there has to be further discussion before the ad hoc committee can really take any action, so that we have appropriate direction.
So why don't we continue this item until the fire department can be
So
present?
I'm going to butt in and move that we continue this item, number 9, discussion and possible action of the fire department's staffing and salary to the first meeting in April.
Assuming we can concurrently have the report you mentioned, Bruce, that would represent your and Muriel's
Correct.
recommendations regarding a staffing survey.
So would you
Okay.
agree to the first meeting in April, or as when staff is ready to bring it back?
So the first meeting in April, or if they're not prepared, an appropriate meeting thereafter.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Okay, then we'll move on now to what appears as item number 10 on your agenda. The award of the library architectural and environmental agreement. Juliana, have we a report?
Thank you. So the City Council approved to go out for a request for proposal for architectural and engineering for the library expansion project, which was presented by the LTAC committee. So the RFP went out and we did receive 3 bids. They were all from very different companies. We had a large firm from Sacramento, a medium-sized firm from Chico, and then a smaller local firm. And so the responses to RFP, we had 4 city staff members were chosen to review and score the proposal based on the selection criteria presented in the RFP that was approved, and that selection criteria starts on page 139 of your packets. And then the RFP finalists, our final recommendation from staff is to award Mount Shasta Engineering, Inc., the architectural and engineering contract based on their performance. They were the highest ranking, highest scored of all 3. The Library Tax Advisory Committee met on February 5th, 2018 to discuss and offer recommendation to the city regarding the RFP finalist and proposed agreement. LTAC committee supported the city staff recommendation to award the RFP to a local firm, but did not agree with the proposed agreement. The committee has issues with the proposed pricing and proposed scope of work. The committee does not feel further technical studies, public outreach, and architectural design is needed on the expansion project. Previous work has been done by the committee that they feel is adequate in these areas. The committee has stated that the conceptual drawings that were shared in the RFP process those are the final designs for the library, therefore additional architectural work mentioned in the proposal is unnecessary. The committee unanimously recommended at that time that the City Council postpone the award of the RFP until LTAC obtains further details and clarifies the scope of work and work previously done, and they were not comfortable making a recommendation at that time. So I did make one minor change to the agreement post-LTAC meeting, and so I revised the public outreach section of Exhibit A in your packets, which is, excuse me one second. Exhibit A starts on page 211 of your packet. And so I did amend that to include review previous public outreach information. So the document that was prepared, Exhibit A, is based off of the input that I got from City Council, Planning Commission, and the Library Tax Advisory Committee prior to the RFP. The proposed agreement was mutually constructed by city staff and the finalist, and the scope of work and deliverables are those outlined by City Council in the RFP and the required documents for all new and renovated construction in the city of Mount Shasta. So basically the required documents that we need to have for a building to become eligible for construction are listed from page 140 to 141 in your packets. And those are required to meet California building standards, ADA standards, and Uniform Fire Code. So the pieces of the scope of work after reviewing with the project, the finalists for the RFP, the pieces that can be taken out without causing any detriment to the project itself are the lead and the public outreach sections of the contract. So those are not required normally by the city for any public building. And then the public outreach, LTAC does have a substantial amount of previous public outreach that could be used in place of that. So those are the two that can be taken out without being detrimental to the project. But otherwise, the architectural phases and things like that, based on my meeting with the RFP finalists, need to be kept in because there's certain things that weren't taken into account in the conceptual design that will have to be flushed out. A lot of it has to do with, the exact widths of the walls. Different ADA upgrades may need a little bit of additional architectural design, and then the upgraded HVAC system for the entire building. So that's pretty much what I covered in that. And I recommend the city staff recommendation is to go forward with the RFP at this time. Based on the scope of work and the deliverables. Nick and I did work really hard to take out as much as we could and have the city do as much work as we could to bring the cost down. For example, the CEQA portion of this project has been scaled down quite a bit so that I'm doing a lot of the noticing in response to comment letters and that. So we brought that cost down. We took out the original proposal of landscape architecture for a later date. That will still need to happen, but that can be done through the city's beautification committee or other means. And we've pared down as much as we can without compromising the final project. One of the things you will see that's not in the RFP and it's not in the Exhibit A is telecommunications wiring. Upon further discussion with the finalists, that would be an addendum to our IT consultant contract with the city. That would save us a lot more money that way, doing it through Kevin rather than doing it through this process. And we'll take that into consideration when it comes to the electrical phase, where the electrical would be designed. So.
Okay, thank you. And since we heard this, I believe it was a month ago at a city council meeting, I decided to appoint an ad hoc committee to listen once again to the staff's perspective as representing the preferred contractor and LTAC's perspective. And I'd like to hear from our advisory or our ad hoc committee members as to what the process was, what you learned, and where you see us going from here.
Okay, so there were two ad hoc committee meetings regarding this project. The first one was about 3 weeks ago, in which Juliana and the engineering firm leader were present, and Paul and I and the city manager. Juliana led the meeting and went over items pretty much akin to what she just said. And the discussion led from a review of the contract to what the problems LTAC had with the project, which she already knew. And we talked about ways to change this $256,000 bid downward price-wise. So I left thinking that there would be a change to number 4, the lead evaluation and the public outreach. And Juliana just pointed out that she found some cost savings with number 12, which is the CEQA study. I assume that's what you meant, right? Right. So how much money? I see about $35,000 plus that you would be saving, because at the second meeting, which was led by Dennis of LTAC, we got into details about LTAC's problems with this bid. So Juliana's going to tell me what the saving is.
I was just doing the math.
Yeah.
It's about 40-some thousand.
Okay, so it brings it closer to $200,000, maybe about 210 from 256. But that first meeting was a relatively detailed discussion of the particulars of the contract, and I brought up what the concerns at LTAC are, but again, Juliana already knew, so we had a pretty narrow discussion about what could actually be eliminated, and you heard her response here. Second meeting was a week ago, well, it was last week on Thursday. Dennis was there with the librarian, Courtney, and Bruce was there, and Paul and I were there, and we listened to Dennis go over the history of this project in detail. He had a list of all the meetings regarding the progression of the project from the beginning of the library tax, essentially. Dennis feels that many of these items are either, one, redundant and/or excessive cost-wise. I guess that's the cleanest way to say it. And that possibly it wasn't bid correctly. In other words, while there were three candidates that ended up responding or qualified, he feels as if it was sole sourced, and that only one group actually gave a number as to the price of doing this project, this planning project. Examples of redundancy would be the public outreach that's already been done. The site surveying, he had a map done by a certified surveyor. So he believes that many of these items can either be eliminated because of work already done or through volunteer work going forward, such that potentially the cost of this planning part of the project could be lowered substantially more than $40,000, possibly as low as $150,000 to $200,000. So he thinks it would be appropriate to look at potentially rebidding this after certain parts of this list are eliminated because they're actually either done or could be done pro bono. So we walked away thinking, well, actually before I walked away, we talked about a potential process where LTAC would take it back to their building planning subcommittee, and analyze what it is that they can do to bring the costs down, then bring that to a regular LTAC meeting.
A regular LTAC meeting?
Right, yeah, special LTAC meeting, excuse me, but with the full LTAC group, and then make a recommendation to city council and city staff after that work would be completed. And with the objective of bringing the cost down substantially. The LTAC does not want to spend $250,000 of their $400,000 nest egg. They think that would not be a wise move financially, and that they have a fiduciary responsibility to the public and to the city to be as financially responsible as possible. So my feeling that it is that they should be given a chance to potentially lower those costs, because if it's possible, if it's allowable, legally speaking, process-wise, they should be given the opportunity to continue to pursue their goal of lowering the cost of this planning part of the project. So that was my takeaway from the second meeting, that they should be given a chance to present the city and the city council what it is that they could do to improve on this this bid, and then possibly, if necessary, rebid it with changes to what is required.
I'll take other council members' questions in a moment. Before we move to Paul, John, when you said you agreed that they would provide additional information, in what form is that information? I mean, we've
Okay, well,
heard them
for instance,
speak, but is there more specific?
Yeah, for instance, on the land surveying, they have a land survey, it's actually done, but it's not, there's no, to me, there wasn't identifying features with respect to the surveyor. It didn't look official enough to me to be part of the process at this point, but certainly if that surveyor is still available, he or she could either redo that or make the work that's been done official. That would be one example. Other things such as architectural design, they feel as if they can find either pro bono work, that could cover these different items, or should be rebid to make it a little bit more competitive, hopefully bringing the price down.
So they would demonstrate that?
They would have, yeah, they feel that they can demonstrate or actually get the work done in some of these cases, right?
Okay. Paul, other questions of John before we go to Paul?
Questions of John? No.
Paul, you
No
want to
presentation.
share your?
John said everything I was going to just say. They feel strongly that they have people who can do the engineering and get the proper stamps required. We asked them to go back to their building committee, come up with in writing what they can do for us, and that's what the process is right now. So I really can't add anything more from what John said, other than they feel that they have the capacity to provide documentation and stamps by engineers and a land surveyor and a couple other people. So.
Okay, thank you. Questions by council members?
I have a question for staff, because frankly, I haven't encountered this particular situation in the past. And
Not?
have not, that I recall. My question would be, what are the legal alternatives? I like the idea of giving LTAC the opportunity to take this back and see what they can do. Does the city have that right? If the city were to take that course of action, is the city then required to set this out for a rebid? Or can we say?
I think from my perspective, you have a couple of questions here. And the first question would be, given the report of your ad hoc committee, that I would basically concur with the report. There was certain information that the LTAC people said they had already completed satisfactorily, did not need to see it done again. The committee, I think, very clearly said to them, all right, show us your documentation so we can see if we can accept it. And then there were other issues I would classify as we don't need to do it, it's not necessary. So to identify those in writing and have the LTAC committee, so you know who you're dealing with here, one group, one recommendation, bring it back to the ad hoc committee, they could then review what's presented and advise the council. So I think that's where you are. It is my position that if you start changing this document, changing the scope of this project, you should re-advertise this.
Right, so we can't say that this is the preferred contractor and then start chipping away on this preferred contractor's scope of work.
No, staff prepared a process of how they were going to go forward to see if we could find a contractor to do the work. That report came to City Council. City Council reviewed it and approved it. Said, this is the process we want staff to use. Staff used that process. And this is what we came up with the preferred consultant. It's a local company. And their bid is within the parameters that staff told you it was going to end up being based on their experience. Subsequent to that, it was determined that we want to take another look, a little closer look at it, and we appointed the ad hoc committee. One of the issues you have to keep in mind here, this is a public works project. You will pay prevailing wages. It's the law.
I don't have any criticism as to the process. My concern is simply that whatever we do, we do in a lawful manner that doesn't get us in trouble. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from and asking about. What I think I hear is the council could not take any action, have LTAC make their recommendations on what changes might be made, meet with the ad hoc committee on that and bring it back. And at that point, council would have to decide whether it needs to go out for a rebid or not.
Precisely. And the risk you run in that is that you go back out to bid, you lose your previous applicants, and now you
Start all
get
over.
something that is
and we did discuss
less
that.
acceptable to you.
So the other part of my question, if I may, and I'm not sure that I got an answer, and maybe we don't know the answer tonight, and we have to confer with others to get an answer. Would the city be operating within its legal discretion and rights to negotiate with the preferred contractor for a lesser price, lesser scope of work, and approve that contract for a lesser scope of work without having to rebid?
You can, and that's basically part of the staff report. So the portions you could take out are the lead and the public outreach. All of the other phases are phases that are required based off of consultation with Nick, is those need to be in place at those prices that we've agreed upon to get the documents that we would need to go forward. So as far as paring down the contract even more outside of those two, that's not possible at this point.
Well, I'm hearing LTAC say that they think they've already done land surveying, and that for a small amount of money, they can satisfy the needs, and something, can't remember what else there was, but something else.
So the bigger thing about this, so there's two phases to every public works project. There's the planning and then there's the construction. When we go into planning, when we do a request for proposal or a request for quote, we go for qualifications. So we do need a certified architect, a certified designer, someone who's certified under the state of California. That's why we don't typically look at price for the planning aspect, because we typically look at the price when we go to RFP for construction bids. One of the things I would caution, and something that we did talk about with Nick, is that if we did recommend subcontractors who are at a highly reduced price or who are willing to donate their services, he felt very uncomfortable with that, because typically when you have a firm coming in who have the qualifications to do this, they have their own people they're comfortable with. So you're kind of asking someone to really operate with someone they don't necessarily trust. Sorry. We'll wait for that. You're asking them to operate or to work with someone they may not have career history with or don't know the quality of their work. So, in this case with this RFP, there really isn't too much more to negotiate with the contractor, and he is here today, so he can speak to that more if you'd like. But as far as it is today, if you begin paring down any of the architectural electrical phases, it's going to be a different project. Need to
So,
be bid.
so in essence, if there are 13 parts to this planning phase, the ones you mentioned that could be eliminated are 2, and then 1 was changed. To go beyond that would be changing the planning project so much that essentially we would, it's in other words, if LTAC came up with 5 more items that could be eliminated either through pro bono work or actual certification of documents from the past, it would end this particular planning project, and it would be a restart situation.
I think the bigger thing you also have to take into account the scope of work that was originally proposed out. So one thing that was not communicated to me well was the building footprint and the site plan that I got. I was told they were a concept. They were not the final drawings. And it's my understanding that LTAC believes that those are the final drawings. That is what they want. So you're kind of asking a contractor to do 2 different things. What we proposed was, we want to do an expansion like this concept. Can you help us do that? And then the other project that you're asking them to do is, I want you to do the A&E for exactly this project. It's not common. The second choice is not very common, because when you come into a building footprint that isn't necessarily architecturally designed out already, you take on a lot of risk for your firm, because there's a lot of assumptions being made there, because they're expecting this product on the concept sheet as their final design, and that may not be possible in some cases. So I feel like if you were to approach this from the second project portion, you would get a lot less people willing to take on that risk of that project not being feasible. So it is a different project, because we asked for a doubling of the square footage, whether it's done via the actual concept drawing or in some other fashion. That's what the first project was, if that makes sense. So it's, I'm trying to think of a really good example. When so my family works on these types of projects. So we were contracted to do like a cooling system for a tower on an industrial site. They don't come in and say, we want this exact cooling unit in this cooling tower. They come in and say, we would like to improve the cooling system. So that's 2 different projects, so there was a circumstance where someone came in, they wanted a certain size unit put on their building, and we told them that's not feasible, that's not going to work with the structural integrity of the building. The project applicant came back and said, no, you're going to put it on the top of the building, and we pulled out of the project. So do you see how I'm like trying to, there's 2 different projects there, and if you're coming in saying, we want to put this exact thing on the ground, that is a totally different project than, we just want to expand this.
So I'm, good discussion and explanation so far. So my understanding, and forgive us all for this has been a fairly steep learning curve with significant impacts on folks. My understanding is that what we approved was a process that you had laid out, as well as a conceptual plan based on a drawing. It wasn't just a theoretical doubling of capacity. I'm trying to get confirmation here. We saw a drawing and we said, that basically looks good to us. You may have to push it out here, or you may have to do something, but we also agreed to a conceptual drawing, so not just a theoretical. Is that correct?
In the building world, a concept drawing is a theoretical drawing.
Okay.
So until someone says this is a final drawing and it's stamped, it's not a final drawing, because it could change for any number of reasons.
Okay, any other questions? And then we'll go to public comment.
Do they look at prevailing wages for things that have already been completed before? For instance, land surveyor, whether his helper was paid prevailing wages. Do they come back and review those? Does that ever happen? You know what I mean? I know in highway construction, they check all the records for the whole project to make sure prevailing wages were paid. I'm just wondering if in a project like this, that would be checked. Say, for instance, we have an architect and they have people working for them and they're drawing things, if they're getting paid under prevailing wage. Just something that we need to know to protect ourselves and protect, we don't want to get bit after we've done this work. I just thought of that. I don't know. Does anybody know that question, answer to that? Yeah.
If you can do it in the
Are we ready to go to public comment, folks? Can we just, yeah, and Nick, come on up and make your response, and then you can have 3 minutes after that if you'd like.
I can just respond real quick because it sounds like you're interested. We're exempt from prevailing wage requirements as professionals, so our billable rates are what they are. So hope that helps with that question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have you any public comment you'd like to make, Nick? Just anything you'd like to share your perspective about?
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, I'm here, more to answer questions and to listen to what the council and the city's concerns are. I think my main comment is going to be, just from listening to everyone, is that, and from hearing secondhand what LTAC is talking about. As a professional and as a firm that has to stamp every drawing that we take responsibility for, number one, we can't just take somebody who's not licensed that says this is a final drawing, we just need engineering. Well, if the design isn't code compliant, there's really not much we can do with that. And we try to mitigate that in a lot of cases in our daily business with, albeit smaller projects, but, it's very difficult to do that. The surveying, for instance, there's no detailed topography, site utilities. There may be some boundary work because of monumentation that wasn't found. So, I think there's a disconnect between the background work that we've done and bringing in a good team. We haven't just brought in like the biggest and the best people. We've tried very hard to build a local team of people that knew the community and that worked in the community. We've talked to staff and spent a lot of time, a lot of hours negotiating a contract, in the best interest of the city. So I think that's my biggest thing is while we could renegotiate a couple of things, there is just, in my opinion, no way that we can allow an advisory committee to pull out, multiple phases and then expect, or to bring in other, I don't know what they mean by other stamps, but to bring in others to do the work that a licensed professional, typically has control over as the project engineer. It's similar to DSA work in schools or hospitals where you have a architect of record, where they're responsible for all of the professional aspects, all of the team, all the work that the team does. So, and again, I don't want to shut the door on any further negotiation because we did work and, we all agree that while we could take out a few of the tasks that weren't specifically required, there's not a whole lot of room we can, just start, and, I don't even know who we would negotiate, lower costs of each individual task. It's kind of, this is beyond what I ever anticipated, having to respond to in this request for a proposal.
Thank you very much, Nick. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can I ask Nick a question? Yeah, so where do you stand as far as the lead element and the public outreach element? That was what the two elements she said are removable without real harm, but where do you stand with those?
That's correct. For the most part, Our plan, knowing the potential cost to make application to the U.S. Green Building Council and actually certify LEED, we assumed and thought from the beginning that that was going to be something that the city did not want to spend their money on. So we came up with a plan that we proposed on to find ways that we could create energy efficiency design, and both in the HVAC system, we talked with the mechanical consultant on that, and we could find equivalency. And we could also provide the city with, and we budgeted time in there to provide a final report that the committee or Courtney, the director, could go and like you could put information on the wall just kind of as learning tools to where this is what we've done here, this is what we've done there. You know, you have exterior work, you have interior work, and there is quite a bit of time to go through the checklist and all of the credits that you have to qualify for to achieve LEED status. So, you know, the public outreach, certainly that was something that we felt we could do, and that, you know, was appropriate for the project, and that, you know, would benefit in certain ways, you know, what we do. But again, that also requires additional design revisions and, you know, code review, and so there's lots of work that goes in behind that. So like I said, it's, while, you know, I'm not saying there's no way to renegotiate within other tasks that we're not talking about, like architectural design, it's not really, I don't think it's advisable, and I don't think it would result in a better project to take out, which we could, public outreach and the LEED portion, which we wouldn't spend all that time doing that, or, you know, holding meetings and going through the design revisions. But you know, I think we all felt, staff and myself, that that would be the limit that we could probably manage. And I'm going to leave it at that to answer your question clearly.
Thanks, Nick, very much. Anything else for Nick? Okay, you're welcome to take a seat.
Thank you, you're
you
welcome.
very much. Any other of those of you in the audience who would like to share your thoughts?
The basic problem that we have here is that
Would you please introduce yourself for the...
I'm Dennis
Thank you.
Johnson. I'm the chairman of the LTAC committee. Is that there's a disconnect between the RFP that was put out and the work that we've been doing for 5 years on the project. One example was the example that Juliana just mentioned, and that was the fact that we needed to do outreach programs, whereas we did outreach programs starting in 2013. I presented a list of all of the outreach programs that we've had over that period of time, 2013, 2014. Unfortunately, nobody sitting here in the city council chamber, staff and city council members, were, except for Tim, who wasn't on the city council at that time, participated in those particular things. So when they put out the RFP without asking us what we'd already done, we'd already done a lot of the tasks that were in the RFP, including, as I said, the outreach, and it was an extensive outreach program. As you can look at the people that attended and see that. And secondly, then in 2016, we started a process of actually getting together community members and doing a design and working with the people in the library to do a basic design feature. And it's far more than just a concept. You know, this is, you know, it was done by Chris Snyder, who's been doing design features for years and years. And I understand it's not complete, and we don't have any desire to go ahead and do the engineering or anything else on this, but we do have a desire to somebody to take our design into effect, because this is essentially the building after lots of work by individuals who volunteered their times in the community and that we put together. And we need to piggyback off this, and we want the opportunity to go back. I must remind you that as of now, LTAC has not made a recommendation on this particular thing. Our recommendation was that we wanted to take another look at it. We had set up that with John and Paul to do that and give them some documentation on where we think we might be able to save significant amounts of money on the process. And we'd like to do that and then come back to you with that. And if you don't, with a recommendation from LTAC as to what exactly we want to do going forward. Obviously, it's up to the city council to make the ultimate decisions about what they want to do. But I think it would be very disturbing to me after having spent all this time and having all these other people having spent incredible amounts of time on this planning process and design process to not have this been taken into consideration. And I don't think that was reflected in the original RFP. So.
Thank you, Dennis. Well said. Other comments, please. Yes, John.
John Kennedy, Mount Shasta. I have nothing to do with the library, but as a taxpayer here in town, when I seen what was being bid and what was being done here, I was appalled at the idea that we would spend, $250,000 before we even build anything. I just can't believe, I've built several things here in town, and I can't believe that it'd be that much expense just to get this project started. And I think what John said, there were a lot of comments in terms of reducing the costs. And from what I understand, a lot of that architectural, I understand what, is it Nick? I think it is, what he's saying too, and that, we can't accept somebody else's project, architectural project, and then just do the engineering on it. That's a tough situation, but I've had 4 or 5 different buildings that I've built here, and that's exactly what we've done. I realize this is a public entity that the public's going to be using. The projects that I had were also rentals, which I consider projects that people are going to live in and survive, and I've had somebody else engineer them, had somebody else do the architectural work on it, and they're fine. As far as I know, they haven't fallen down, and so I think that this can be done, and from what I understand, the architectural work basically has been done pretty much for free, and we're looking here at $73,000 for architectural work. The lease deal, that can be eliminated. We get up to $96,000, $97,000. There's some other things in here. The land surveying at $5,000. I just had something surveyed, for $3,000. Actually, it cost me $2,000. Just add another $1,000. But there's costs in here that can be reduced. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you folks are meeting tomorrow? Yeah, and they're going to discuss what John was talking about. Let's sit down, talk about the cost, see what we can cut down, what we can pare down, and see if we can get this to a reasonable amount. The feeling is that their project should cost, in terms of getting it ready, anywhere from $80,000 to $130,000. And I would hope that you do not vote on this. You do what Tom recommended, and let them do their work and come back to you and present what they've got to present to you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Others of you? Others who'd like to speak? Okay. So we had an ad hoc committee that I appointed a month ago because of what we hear are the discrepancies here. So I feel accountable for whatever time delays we've had, but I also felt strongly that both sides, all sides need to be well heard here so that the council can make the best decision and the LTAC can make the best recommendation upon which we make our decisions. I'm quite sensitive to the impact on our preferred contractor at this point. I can only imagine the machinations you probably have already had to go to, as well as will continue to go through in order to make adjustments based on a schedule that's already been surpassed. But we did appoint an ad hoc committee. These folks were charged with making a recommendation to the council based on their research with this item. And at their last meeting on Thursday night, they agreed to have LTAC get together with their building committee, which I understand is happening tomorrow, to provide whatever backup information you have to provide to us. And you will take it to LTAC as a committee, then you will forward on a formal recommendation to us. I understand that correctly. So what I'd like to propose, in the interest of moving this project on, I'm still discussing.
Oh, I thought you were going to move on.
No. What I'd like to propose is that we ask for the LTAC report within 2 weeks, if you think that's doable, so that we can keep this thing moving. And that then that LTAC recommendation go to staff, that can be then sent to all city council at the same time to review, but that Paul and John then come prepare. I guess you can't share your recommendation until the council meets fully. Is that correct?
Do you want LTAC's recommendations to go to the ad hoc for review so your ad hoc committee can advise the full council? Or are you saying you want it to come directly to the full council, bypassing the ad hoc?
No, I don't want to bypass the ad hoc, but I want to give all of us as much time to deliberate as possible, on top of which we would hear your recommendations. I don't want to dilute the power of your recommendations, but I also don't want to push this off another 2 or 3 weeks. Does that make sense? So however that works best, so that you get their product, you can make your recommendation, and we can get the information at the same time or right after your recommendation. Can they make a recommendation outside of a council meeting to us, or do we need to wait? We have to wait, do we not? Okay. So I was thinking that if we could see LTAC's...
If your ad hoc committee meets with LTAC, looks at LTAC's information, they can make a decision at their meeting, convey it to the manager, and we include it in their staff report, and they are here present at the council meeting, or at least hopefully, to make sure that they're not misquoted, and then you have the benefit of their input. You have the benefit of LTAC, benefit of the ad hoc.
I'm hearing, if I may, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing the mayor suggest that LTAC's recommendations be made available to council members once it's made, which might be 10 days or 2 weeks before the meeting. And I think that's a good recommendation, so that we're not looking at LTAC's recommendations at the last minute. In terms of the ad hoc subcommittee, their recommendations can be included in the packet, recognizing that we're only going to get that a short time before the meeting. Either way, there's not going to be any discussion, and I think doing both of those would be legal and appropriate, desirable in my mind.
And John just pointed out that you want to...
Well, I'm a little concerned about timing. Will LTAC be able to have this meeting with the ad hoc committee in, say, 10 days?
Well, if I might make a recommendation, it seems to me that
We're recording.
It seems to me that you said earlier in the session that for the next city council meeting, I take at the end of the month, that you already have a full agenda, so you're probably not going to want to discuss this. But I can see you wanting to have a recommendation by the next city council meeting, essentially the first one in April, so that you can make a decision on this thing. And I think that's a relative, that we can do that, because we have to meet with our building committee, but then we have to meet with LTAC to get an official recommendation, and then we have to meet with the ad hoc committee. So that might take 2 weeks, but that still gives us 2 weeks before your next city council meeting, so we can get you a full packet of our thinking, where we're going, what their recommendation might be, and everything, you know, at least a week and maybe even further, 10 days ahead of your next city council meeting.
Thank you, Dennis. The next city council meeting is the 26th of March, and that's the one that we won't have time to deliberate fully enough. So the one following that is April 9th. So it would be kind of you if you could manage to get the material out to us through staff, through the process we just outlined, and through staff a week ahead of the April 9th meeting.
So if this is moving to the April 9th meeting, then all this information has to be to ad hoc, and ad hoc has to finish its work, and staff finishes its work by April 4th in order to meet the April 9th meeting.
Is that doable, staff, do you think?
Well, that
We'll make
puts
it
us,
doable.
again, with a short time frame before we get the material. But if we can get the material prior to then, we have a
Sooner is
greater
better.
opportunity of
Yeah.
Yes.
looking at it. And I think I'm hearing Dennis say that that's possible.
Okay.
So really, I think what we would be doing is taking no action tonight and continuing it to a future agenda.
Well, I think we've outlined a process for which we have agreement. So we have direction to staff. We have agreement from the LTAC committee. I hope we have understanding from all those present, the situation we find ourselves in. I hope you feel heard. We've listened carefully to the different perspectives, and now it will be back on LTAC's plate, if you will, to bring back to ad hoc. And at that point where you have that final report from LTAC, perhaps that could be distributed to all the city council members. Then you'll be meeting with advisory or ad hoc committee, and they will give us their recommendations prior in time for the April 9th meeting. Agreed?
Okay, so we need a motion to continue this?
I don't know if we need a motion. We just did direction to staff. Do we need a motion?
Why don't you make a motion so we have a record?
Okay,
of
so
that?
I'm going to move that we continue item 10, award of the library architectural and environmental agreement, to the April 9th meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Opposed. One opposed. Okay, thank you again. We'll just take a couple-minute breather here for a bathroom break or whatever. Actually, number 12 for us now, the first reading of ordinance CCO-18-16, City Council compensation. Bruce?
Yes, thank you. So staff is recommending that you approve the first reading of the attached ordinance regarding the city council member compensation. Current compensation for the city members is established by the Mount Shasta Municipal Code. The current rate of compensation is $137.50 per month. So your city attorney advises that Government Code Section 36506 provides for council salaries based on population, and that cities with up to 35,000 in population, the rate shall not exceed $300 per month, excluding any expenses or benefits. And the rate must be established by ordinance, and the electors may set higher rates, electors being the voters. The government code provides for a 5% adjustment in each calendar year if an appropriate ordinance is enacted. This applies to all council members, and it takes effective when the next council member is seated in office. So right now, the cost per year of council compensation is $9,075. If enacted, it would take it to $13,200 per year. So you're at $137.50. This increase, if approved, would take you to $220 per month. The ordinance is attached, and we would recommend that you approve the first reading.
Thank you, Bruce. Questions for Bruce?
Is there a reason why 5% was used and not some other percent?
It's said in statute.
Yeah, it's by statute.
Is 5% a max?
Yes.
You could use something lower than 5%?
Well, I would assume so, yes.
Okay.
Other questions for Bruce?
I think we've already talked about this. There hasn't been an increase in the council member salary for 10 years?
11.
11?
11 now. That's
That's the only question I have.
Is there a motion for approval?
Public comment? You want to open and close
That's
public
right.
comment?
I looked out there and saw no one.
Well,
But
just
you're
for the
right.
recording.
Technically, thank you. Thank you.
There's
I'd like
no
to open
camera
the
on there.
public. Thank you, Robert. I'd like to open the public hearing. Are there any public comments?
Just open and
Seeing
close
none,
it.
there are none. I will close the public hearing.
So for
Now
discussion,
council discussion.
yeah, for discussion, I guess I would be more comfortable with a percentage that more accurately reflects the last 10 to 11-year period since there was an increase. And we've been closer to a 1% inflation. So I would be comfortable with more a 2.5% increase that's closer to what the market was actually doing. I don't really see the need to go to the full 5%. This gives you a little more cushion to get to your 300 max. So that would make it closer to 175 versus the 137 we're now getting.
I move approval of the ordinance of the city of Mount Shasta establishing compensation for members of the city council. Move it to a second reading.
I'll second that.
Council discussion. It would be nice to make some more, and I think it might be an attractant for people, but I spend, I would say, between 25 and 30 hours a week, at least 25 and 30 hours a week. I just like that for the record. I know that there are others of you who spend pretty close to that, if you're able. And it would be appropriate, I think, to go for the full 5% after an 11-year hiatus.
So just for clarification, so this doesn't take effect immediately?
No, this is the first reading.
No. Something about
Once you
you're
do
not
the
eligible for
second
this?
reading, then you have a 30-day period before the ordinance is effective, and then the salary does not become effective until a new member of the council is seated.
Which would be the November
Must be
election.
November.
So three of you.
The felt impact of this will be for the following half, the second half of the next fiscal year.
Correct.
And I calculate this as approximately $5,000 increase to the budget, when this will all be budgeted accordingly, so, okay.
So you have a motion and a second, I believe.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? One opposed. Okay, thank you. The next item then is discussion and possible action for the Columbia Telecommunications Corporation Ad Hoc Committee presentation. And I believe that would be Mayor Pro Tem Wagner and Councilmember Stearns. Have you decided how you want to do this?
Actually, it was a combined report. Hopefully, you've read the report. So at this point, we have received what CTC considers to be its final report, or perhaps its new final report, because there's been a final report perhaps for the last 2 or 3 times that we've gone through this process. We have not yet, the city of Mount Shasta has not yet met with City of Weed or City of Dunsmuir, something that hopefully will be scheduled in the next couple of weeks. I indicated my thinking that we're not quite at the point where this really is a final report, because there may be additional action as a result of the joint meeting that we think ought to be taken.
As a result of what?
Additional action that may, we think that may be taken as a result of the joint meeting of the 3 cities. But the purpose of this was to give you an update of where we are, because the last time we gave you an update in terms of broadband committee was about a year ago. So I think that we are close to conclusion of this report. There are some additional items that, or paths or alternatives that the cities might discuss with CTC. What I'd like to do, and Barbara can speak for herself, is to perhaps have the committee, have the ad hoc committee bring this back to the council after we've met with the other cities.
And just for
And at this-
clarification, before we hear from Barbara too, then a critical part of this is for us to decide whether or not they've met the terms of the contract and should therefore be paid the balance of.
Well, I would think that we're not going to make that decision until we have all 3 cities in agreement, because it's 3 cities that entered into the contract and 3 cities that would say, yes, let's make final payment, or let's request item A, B, and C before we make the final payment. At this point, I think it would be good for council to give any sort of feedback to the ad hoc committee that you might have prior to our going into meeting with the other 2 cities.
Any questions for Tim before we go to Barbara? Barbara, can we hear from you, your perspective then?
Yeah, I mean, I did a little outline with my perspective, forwarded it to Tim. He did most of the write-up. Some of my input is still in there. But generally, if I look at the gestalt of this experience with this contract, we went into the contract very focused. We went in with a specific request for fiber to the premises. That means you're going to bring a fiber line to every building and every household in the 3 cities. It's an ambitious goal. And you're going to do it with fiber. And you're going to prefer a private public partnership in that. So that was a specific goal and a specific focus for this feasibility study. Realize that we did not go out to study all the possibilities. and all the costs associated with that, the range of costs. So the way I see this contract, this is, if you want the Tesla with all the options, or the high-end Tesla, this is it. If you want a Volkswagen that can get you there just as well, you can get internet to almost all, or the majority or community, through a fraction of this cost. So they came up with somewhere between 15 and 20 million, you can get a wire to every household. You can take there are many other strategies you can take where you could get closer to like a $4 million total for the 3 cities. You can get to a much more reasonable cost if you start using fixed wireless options. Now this particular CTC is very fiber to the premises focused, so they're not really interested in knowing much about wireless options. They did mention it, they touched on it, but they were very resistant to going there with us because fiber to the premise is their focus. So if we can learn from this contract, and that is perhaps even have a checklist in front of us if we're going to approve a contract. Now, this one cost the city about $33,000. If you're looking at a library, you're an order of magnitude greater. You're looking at $300,000 just for the drawings, not even the build. So here you are, again, addressed to looking at a contract that you may be interested in undertaking, and yet where's your checklist? Where do you have staff buy-in? Do you have, did you go out for bid? All the checklists that you might want to have for before you sign on the dotted line. So that was some of my comments, generally speaking. I thought it was super focused. I liked Tim's write-up. I think it was pretty well represented what happened. The only objection I had was this comment on page 219, paragraph 5, that starts with the city's vision and goals established. Now, if those city's visions and goals were established, then it was before it got to council, because I didn't participate in any vision or goal establishment workshop for this. So I think when he's saying that on page 219, he's referring to this specific, let's get fiber to the premises to every building in the 3 cities, and let's focus on private-public partnership as the business model. So I think that's what he means.
Yeah, for clarification, that's actually in the CTC, that language was actually in the CTC proposal to the city. We, as a city, modified the proposal and required, as part of the contract, that CTC not only look at fiber to the premises, but also acknowledge that there are emerging technologies and to discuss alternatives for us so that we could make decisions amongst the alternatives. So one of the questions that remains is, did CTC provide adequate discussion of the alternatives? And I think there's some question about that.
Not much.
I agree with that comment. Also, I like your comment in here about how it kind of started some of the local carriers to push forward a little faster in their high-speed internet. So I know that's happening at a much more rapid pace than I thought it was previously going to happen. So I think that, in a way, was pretty good. So, and wireless, who knows what's going to happen with it in the next 2-3 years. There's all sorts of claims, but, don't know yet.
Oh, wireless is already being, fixed wireless and 4G is already being put out there.
So I'm not making any predictions, but one of the possibilities that would come out of the 3 city meeting might be to say, CTC, we think that you have, in fact, given a very good discussion of fiber to the premise, but we don't think the discussion about alternatives that was to be a part of your report has been sufficiently fleshed out.
I also, based on your write-up, I also wonder if we would find their discussion of funding alternatives for the community access model acceptable. Doesn't look like we can afford, without legislative gifting, what they have shown as our preferred. So where are the funding mechanisms?
Right, and that's a very good point. They basically have told us can't do fiber to the premise for everyone, all businesses and all governmental facilities and all households, unless we have an extra, essentially $10 million of startup funding, which we don't have. So another alternative that hasn't been discussed is phase in or partial. Are there segments that we could perhaps do and financially afford, and as a result of getting something started, then add to that over time?
Well, I don't pretend to understand this as well as you two do, but it strikes me that...
Interject.
I'm sorry?
If I might interject, we have a contract, and the contractor believes they've completed the work, and we have 3 cities involved in this contract, and I'm getting questions from the other 2 cities. Do we, the city of Mount Shasta, consider the contract fulfilled, complete? Now, there are other things we could do, but that's probably outside the scope of the contract. So one of the questions we need as a city to be prepared to address is, given what the contract says, did CTC adequately fill that?
So I think we've identified 2 things. One is it's their discussion of alternatives to fiber to the premise is inadequate. And number 2, their discussion of funding mechanisms, which I think they offered as part of that was part of the agreement, has been inadequate. Those are 2 things that I think I've heard. The question I have here is that, are we really bound to each other as 3 signatories? What happens if one of us says, well, we're done. We're done. We don't want to pay anymore. What does that imply? Did you have a conversation? I don't remember if the contract binds us to an agreement among the cities about finalization.
Well, we essentially have a partnership, and I don't know that in terms of spending more money, the cap on this is 100,000, regardless of whether there's more work or not. I don't know where we are on the finances as to
The balance.
how much of that is left, or if we're already past the 100,000.
No, we are not past the 100,000 because I have not authorized Muriel to write the check. So we held the checks back.
No, I meant we wouldn't be past 100,000, but are we past 100,000 worth of hours that they feel that they put in? Obviously, we haven't paid more than 100,000 because we have at least a holdback, if nothing else. But we're not going to go past 100,000 under any circumstance.
How much have we spent so far?
And what you've spent, has it been with an agreement that the other 2 cities would spend at the same rate? They would expense,
We're basically looking at having spent close to $80,000 already, everybody equally participating. There's roughly 20,000 left to be
Okay.
paid out.
And it sounds like the other two cities are really looking to our lead as,
I think-
about the adequacy of performance.
I think they are, yes.
Uh-huh. Well, are there other comments in addition to the two I think I heard?
A feasibility
terms-
study doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be feasible. So,
Right,
So
right.
yeah, I'm disappointed that we're not seeing a way forward. That's disappointment for me. But doesn't mean that we can't continue to work the issue. So.
Right, right. And it doesn't mean that we might not want to pursue the wireless alternative that you've brought up too, as a next step. But I think right now we're talking about what do we do with CTC?
I can give you my perspective and recommendation, and that is, from my perspective, CTC has not provided the cities adequate information about the alternatives and the cost of the alternatives, the feasibility of the alternatives, for us to really say, yes, you have fulfilled the contract. They have written a few pages about here are the alternatives, and we don't think that those are really viable for you. We've made the decision for you, essentially. Thank you very much, but we would like to have the foundational information. What are the costs involved? How would that be? How would this happen? They spent pages and pages and pages going through that for the fiber to premises, but not to the alternatives.
Yeah, but in the scope of work, it does say fiber to the premises network, or IC, or alternative, affordable, and cost-effective high speed. Okay.
Which was a specific language that we,
Or,
it was a specific language that we added to the contract.
So Barbara, are you in agreement with Tim's assessment here? About, if CTC were sitting here and we said, sorry, you didn't do it.
I feel that we have some of the responsibility of actually accepting that focus at the very beginning, saying, yeah, we want to concentrate on fiber to the premises, and we want to concentrate on private-public partnership. So in a sense, we sort of set the limitation from the get-go. And so it would have been a different feasibility. We said, can you show us our options? That's a different study, and might have been more advisable to do at that point.
Sure. In retrospect, we might have wanted to do an assessment of need to have them do it, something that, there's a lot of things in retrospect we might have done differently, but given where we are, is it the ad hoc's recommendation then that we, when we meet with Dunsmuir and Weed, that we say to them, we don't think they've fulfilled the requirements of the contract to address the alternative means?
We're getting pushback from, I feel pushback from CTC, like, that's not their thing. They don't do that,
Well, if I may, this is supposed to be a cutting-edge company.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem cutting edge to me. It's like, I only perform this surgery, this is all we're going to do, and if you need to go somewhere else. I think I think we were somewhat misled a little bit from them, is my personal opinion. And I think that they should have been more adequately, they should have been more forward with us saying, wireless is the age of the future. And they weren't at all upfront with us about that. We're going to just do it this way. We're going to do it our way. This is all we do. And here we're a little town, and then they say it's going to cost how many millions? $20 million?
That's huge for us.
It's huge. It's huge. And I don't think that my recommendation, if another city would come to me, I would say I wouldn't hire these people, because I don't think they adequately handled small-town America with a solution.
Right.
That's how I feel.
The
And I
addi-
could
the
be wrong,
additions- The additions that they added that are underlined or that were redlined as part of the latest draft responded to the cities saying, you've made inadequate discussion about the alternatives. So they did add those few pages, but what they haven't done is and they have said, fiber to the premises is really the best long-term solution. With wireless, you still have a fiber backbone going to the wireless cells, but it's a blended system. And what they haven't, and they've indicated that there are additional costs with that blended system because you have to replace the wireless equipment more frequently. But what we don't know, but they've also indicated it would be less expensive, but they haven't told us how much and whether, based upon the difference of expense, this alternative might be workable for us. And I think that's the additional information that we need to really make a decision.
Any disagreement with what you hear from Tim and Barbara? Okay, so then the plan from here is to meet with Dunsmuir and Weed with that conclusion and see if we can get agreement among the three cities. And then what? Bring it back to council for a decision about next steps?
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Any lack of clarity anywhere? Yeah. Appreciate both of your time on it, and your extra comments, Barbara, were helpful. Thank you. On the process. Greg's excellent.
I would like to clean up the process a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, then let's move on to council reports on attendance at outside meetings. John, you want to start?
Sure. There was no DAC meeting, and the other meetings I went to were the ad hoc meeting regarding the library expansion, which was talked about profusely, so I won't go on with that. Went to meetings regarding the protocol changes. You were all part of that, so I'm not going to report on that.
We like meetings.
Yeah, there's plenty of meetings. The other meetings I've been to regarding the rec district and potential parcel tax are, let's just say it's pending clarification. Mr. Rodriguez has been tasked with figuring out exactly what it is that should be done to improve the rec district, infrastructure-wise, building quality-wise, and potential other special projects. So more to come on that. I had some meetings regarding the rink, but the rink season ended and on February 25th with revenues reaching a record high of $125,500. It's kind of exciting. But to give you a little perspective, I have the Mount Shasta Ski Resort as a customer, and or ski park, and their food and beverage manager. I said, so well, this is what we did. And he goes, so how do you guys do over a weekend? He said, we do that much revenue on a good day during the holidays. So it's a lot more expensive to ski, and they have a full-blown liquor license. So anyhow, that's all I have.
Paul?
I went to the library and the other stuff John talked about. Mount Shasta Girl Bears lost in the playoffs, section playoffs, and the boys lost in the state playoffs.
Oh, they did lose.
So basketball's over, but they all played really well.
And you had some section championships, right?
Boys were second. Or no, they won the section, yeah.
Right.
They won the section.
Yeah. How about you, Tim?
Two items to report, I guess. One, I met with Steve Mitrovich at his request, and Jeff Harkness to talk about community enhancement tax. There are Steve Mitrovich, Jim Mullins, and some others are still very much in favor of having a community enhancement tax. Question was wording and how it would be used. Steve Mitrovich's recommendation was that a community enhancement tax expressly stated would be 50% for infrastructure needs and 50% for
Programs.
other. Thank you. He thought that that would have greater support. Jim Mullins thinks that there is a need and community support for a community enhancement tax. Jeff Harkness also supportive, but indicated that since our prior discussions that the library has been the recipient of a fairly substantial donation, which apparently goes a long ways towards their goals. So
The
they...
library?
I meant the museum, excuse me, thank you. That would be nice if we were the library as well, but it's the museum. So the museum folks are not interested in taking the lead for community enhancement. They may play a supportive role, but they're not as motivated now as they were a month or two ago, whenever that was. So there's that meeting, and then the mayor, the city manager, and I had lunch together with Dr. Stephen Schumacher, who's the new president of COS. It was just a get to know you better sort of meeting, I think, and also discussion about how we could collaborate, coordinate. I thought that was an energizing lunch. And real pleased to hear Dr. Schumacher's ideas for COS that may be helpful.
Schoonmaker.
Huh?
I think it's Schoonmaker.
Schoonmaker?
Schoonmaker.
Schoonmaker. Not Schoonmaker, huh? Schoonmaker. Thank you. Appreciate that. So those are the outside meetings that I recall of interest.
Thank you. Barbara?
I went to the February 28th DEAC meeting, and the members were very curious as to why Tim wasn't nominated, so I had the privilege of explaining that. February 28th protocols, also the March 7th, the Kiwanis Club had their 5th annual Bring Up Your Grades Awards, where 24 assistant students got to come up to the stage, accept their awards, get photos taken, and it was a really nice lunch. Very sweet energy there. Nice that the kids, and the grade averages increased anywhere from a half grade point to a 1.25. I was the highest I heard. March 8th, I went to the all-day resilience workshop. It's fantastic. Did a rapid risk assessment for the wastewater treatment plant. Discovered that they had 2 days worth of diesel for backup in case they lost power, 2 months of chemicals. So in the rapid risk assessment, you can take any aspect of the city and see what would happen in an emergency and what your backup is. So on March 9th, we had the follow-up lunch to the event with 3 planning commissioners there, including Melanie. We talked about needing redundant routes for emergency if Route 89 or I-5 is cut off, and how it would be important for the local transportation committee to look at that, to look at redundant routes for emergency exits.
Thank you. In addition to what's been spoken about then, I attended the opening to the resilience workshop, and it was excellent. Amazing technical support from our federal partners and Bay Area partners Transportation and Bay Area governments. Great facilitation by a planning company. Good attendance. We had probably 20 folks attending from a variety of perspectives. Pacific Power, I also attended a portion of the second day. I had to leave where there was a lot of group interactivity, inquiring of the group about our goals, our concerns, our vulnerabilities. And I also had to miss, unfortunately, the feedback luncheon at the end that Barbara just mentioned, but I'm looking forward to the report about the recommendations to us. I think it's a critical aspect of life here in Mount Shasta to be prepared ahead of time for contingencies, for disaster preparedness. We focused quite a bit on fire, and our entire fire department attended, and CAL FIRE was there, both their planners and their operations people. Anyway, it was a good turnout, very good discussion, and I look forward to more information about it. And I hope that we will continue with an evacuation, a specific item around evacuation planning still. So that was excellent. And I think that's it for me. Thank you. Future agenda items.
I have a few. One, I'd like to get the landing tax sharing agreement back on the schedule. And what I'm talking about there is the modification of the tax sharing agreement. Maybe it's on here and I didn't see it, but it seems to have fallen off, I think.
Well, we have no interest from the county in discussing it. We've met with the Board of Supervisors independently, and the answer is no.
I think that we need to take it to a board as an agenda item.
Okay. That clearly would be a council decision.
Yes.
Do you have the dates you want?
So
the
is there a
council to
second
consider?
I'll second that
council
one.
member? Okay.
Secondly, I'd like to agendize discussion for a possible community enhancement tax, what that might look like, and if there's any interest in doing a modified measure.
I'm going to second that, but it needs to be really, really specific, just to let you know in advance.
And this is in time for the November ballot?
Preferably.
Pardon me?
Preferably.
Oh, Tim, this is real quick. Is Mitrovic more interested in that than the parcel tax? Just as an aside?
He didn't indicate that he was interested in...
Either one.
He's interested, I think he's interested in both, but he didn't indicate a preference.
Property tax?
Right.
And then number 3, I would like to agendize for perhaps about 3 months from now the pending Stearns DEAC application.
I think we just...
That was continued and not acted on at a prior council meeting. And I know the mayor and maybe someone else indicated that efforts would be made to try to find some other person to apply for DEAC. So that's why I would suggest that it not be any sooner than about 3 months from now. That way. And what I indicated in John's absence regarding my DEAC application is that we have had trouble making quorums with DEAC. And I would be willing to stay on DEAC until somebody else applies, so that there would be less of a problem with quorum. I'd be happy to resign at that point in time.
Just a comment, we are reviewing protocol on that, so that protocol may not allow. If we update the protocol, it won't allow for a council member to be on.
So
He's talking about his position as a business owner. And
Yeah,
his,
but protocol update, well, it's separate, separate.
yeah, it's separate. Well, I'm confused about the pending nature. I just, I don't understand how, if we don't select someone, it's still pending. For anybody.
there was a application that was submitted
Right.
that wasn't acted on, and the action was continued to a future date. So
Is that what you recall? Okay, it was continued to a future date. Okay. Okay.
Question.
Is there a second person then who would agree to put that on the agenda?
Oh, sure, second.
Okay.
I only have one comment on the future agenda items. The cannabis tax seems to have fallen off as an item. Is there a reason for that? Cannabis tax, that was on there for a while, now it's gone. Is there an issue?
Good
To-do
point.
list? Okay.
Yeah, good point.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, that
there
has
is
to be
some-
in
there
by
is some-
July,
Right,
right?
July 5th, somewhere over there.
Okay, and I know that the Clean and Safe folks want to do a special presentation, an upcoming special presentation to the council about their progress, since we have supported them with landfill costs. They would like to share some data about what their year was like. So we'll schedule that. It's a special presentation, yeah, just a 15-minute thing. Clean and safe. Okay, that it? No.
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing as far as the LTAC and what situation we've gotten into with this is part of that is that we lack governance. And I'd mentioned this before. A lack of a library board, which is your typical governance structure for your public institution that's a library. Some libraries have a library board and they have a library foundation that goes out and looks for the big bucks. And then you have your friends of the library that help fund little smaller projects. Usually you have those three
Okay,
aspects of a library. So I would love to see us actually decide whether the council will serve as a library board as per the ordinance, or do we change the ordinance, or do we establish a board that's not the council? It's important because I think part of this, what's happening now, is you really don't have a board that's overseeing this process, that's offering a direction that the library could go. You have an LTAC group that's basically assigned to advise on finances, who's gone off and started designing buildings and is managing the library director and doing all the things that a library board, it's under their jurisdiction. So will the council address whether or not they will serve as the library board, and if not, update the ordinance and decide who's going to serve as the library board? Secondly, as far as that, our contract with the county is over at the end of the fiscal year. Our contract with Courtney is over. The library director is over at the end of the fiscal year.
This fiscal year?
Is an opportunity
That was a 3-year
to review what does that contract say? Is it still up to date? Is there something else we want to have in there? Courtney mentioned in her monthly meeting, monthly report, that yes, this contract with the library is up for review. Those are part and parcel, so.
Yeah. So I agree that this needs to be discussed. I think that there are enough aspects to it that it would be better time spent in a workshop. We could handle it in a protocol workshop because it has to do with how we operate as a council. And then, based on our discussion there, we could bring it forward to a full council discussion. I agree with you that there's a lot of role mess here. It's a messy, and we need some role clarification. But I think rather than take the time in this format to work through some of those aspects, let's do it in a workshop setting and then bring it forward.
I think what might be helpful and productive, even shy of a workshop setting, is to have staff make recommendations as to how to proceed, how the city council would proceed or should proceed as the board of trustees of the library, because we do have an ordinance that says this council is the board of trustees. So what does that mean, and what would be staff's recommendations as to how we might fulfill that?
Make sense? Yeah, okay, thank you.
And then I don't know how to, I mentioned that local transportation might be the group that would look at the redundancy in emergency preparedness evacuation plan. Is that something that we can ask the local transportation group to take on? Is that how it works, or how do you ask another agency to consider redundancy in evacuation?
Well, that's an interesting question. The Siskiyou County Local Transportation Commission is a county-wide body. I think what you're asking is, should the county-wide body consider that? And tomorrow's meeting is canceled, which I received notice of today. But I'd be happy to make that suggestion as an agenda item to LTC.
I have an item I'd like you to represent too, but we don't need to talk about it here.
So perhaps you can just remind me to do so. Send me an email. More emails.
Yeah, thank you for the follow-up. Okay, anything else? Okay, we're adjourned, thank you.